What's up, everybody? Be watching President Biden's farewell address here in a bit. Technically starts at 8. Trump got the ceasefire. I'm sad I voted for Harris. Well, reportedly, it was a joint effort that the Biden administration led the negotiations, but Trump's envoy played a critical role. Sounds like both of them helped get it over the finish line. But we'll see what the details are and what the reports are as we learn more information. It adhered mostly to Biden's framework. And it'll be up to Trump to enforce once Biden leaves office. Hey, Rob. Hey, Avery. What terrifies me most is how swiftly censorship will come down like a huge hammer on us. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, again, it's hard to predict these things. But I'm listen. My general proposition is that the president-elect saying, censorious, creepy things is a big deal, even if he never follows through on them. And we should never normalize the sort of punitive censorship that Trump is advocating for. But who knows? I've got the Biden speech down at the bottom here because it's not time for him to give it yet. As soon as he starts to speak, we'll pull it up. Dustin Gray says Mike Huckabee sure seems like the best guy to make sure Israel plays fair along with Hamas. Listen, foreign policy, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's not my area of expertise to the extent that I have any. Foreign policy is not it. We cover domestic politics here. I'm aware of probably the broad strokes of what's gone on in Ukraine and in Gaza. But my understanding is Mike Huckabee is a pretty staunch an unapologetic Zionist. So I imagine he wants to be quite permissive to the Netanyahu government. Trump is already taking praise for the ceasefire. Yeah, but that's what he did. I mean, listen, there's no doubt. Let's be very clear. This will absolutely fuel the perception that Trump is a deal maker and Trump is a peacemaker. And again, based on the preliminary reports, the only honest thing you can do is give Trump partial credit to this. I mean, there's nothing in the reports which say that he had nothing to do with this or that his envoy had nothing to do with this. It really was a joint effort between the Biden and Trump teams. And I think if Trump were not involved, it's entirely possible this might not have come. So I'm happy to give him credit because it's the honest thing to do. So of course he's going to take credit for it. At this point, do you think Harris was a flawed candidate? I always thought Harris was. There's no such thing as a perfect candidate. Harris had her flaws. She was not the best extemporaneous communicator. She was very cautious, not particularly bold in her campaign. She was not my preferred candidate. I didn't vote for her in the primary. I think she was the first person out of the 2020 primary. Do I think she's smart? Do I think that she's a better candidate or was a better candidate in 2024 by far than she was in 2020? Absolutely. And I think all things considered, she ran a pretty good campaign. It was still a coin flip election. But no, she was Kamala Harris is not my ideal presidential candidate, but then neither was Joe Biden. So the ceasefire is brokered by the Biden administration. Please, people, stop being fooled. Again, yeah, the Biden administration was, again, based on initial reports I've seen, it was a joint effort, but it was the Biden framework that was adopted. The families of the hostages thanked President Biden along with Donald Trump. It really does sound like a joint effort. No more nice guy Democrats. The giant sleeps no more. Yeah, I hope so. I hope we start getting some bold candidates, bold Democrats who are willing to stick it to the elected Republicans, but we'll see. Can you give your 3 favorite things that Biden was able to do to kick off the send-off stream? Yeah. Is COVID management, infrastructure, CHIPS and Science Act. Honestly, it's tough because there's also the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the single greatest investment in climate change, and allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. Honestly, I might have to put that. I might have to bump COVID management down and put the IRA in the top three. You also have the PACT Act, which expanded veterans' health care. Biden's domestic record is really robust. It's truly impressive. His foreign policy record is, I would say, mixed, to say the least. But again, foreign policy is the area in which I am the least competent. Flawed against Trump? I mean, Trump wasn't just a flawed candidate. Trump is, flawed as being generous. Trump is a terrible. I mean, I guess Trump was a great candidate, I suppose, because he won the election. But I mean, like, as a person, he's infinitely more flawed than Kamala Harris. I wanted Kamala Harris to win the election. Her flaws are minuscule compared to his. He failed you. His administration failed you. On his watch, the judiciary has gone walkabout in the face of a man who was guilty on so many counts. Listen, if you want to ask me what Biden's greatest failures are in talking about domestic politics, appointing Merrick Garland is absolutely top three, maybe number one on his domestic failures. But my beef with Merrick Garland was more, I was just having a conversation with my girlfriend. We're talking about, her career, and she's going to apply for, like a promotion at work or whatever. And, my advice was, even if it doesn't work out, you always want to be able to say you did everything in your power to bring about the change you wanted, to bring about the desired outcome, to have some sort of resolution. If Merrick Garland had done everything I wanted him to do, and everything that like Eric Holder and other career prosecutors wanted him to do, Dan Goldman, when I interviewed Congressman Dan Goldman, who was a career prosecutor, even he agreed that Merrick Garland made visible mistakes and took his time, was too lethargic in bringing charges against Donald Trump. Even if Merrick Garland had done everything right, it's very possible that Trump would have never been successfully prosecuted because of the Supreme Court, and President Biden has no control over that. So I don't blame Biden for the judiciary. I blame Biden for hiring Garland, and Garland being a weak attorney general with respect to holding Trump accountable. I was reading different articles that there were talks with both Biden and Trump, but let's not forget that talks for ceasefire were being discussed before Trump. Yeah, exactly. Biden's team had been working on this for months, but Trump reportedly, coming in, like Biden inviting Trump's envoy and working together as a team. Apparently that was decisive, because my understanding is, based on what I've read, it left Netanyahu with no safe harbor. So the way my current conception of it, and again, this is all preliminary, it's not my area of expertise. I've been actually just like reading up on it more and more today, is it's almost like having two parents and a kid, and you kind of defy dad because you can always run to mom, or vice versa. But when mom and dad are both, coming for you, like saying, hey, listen, you need to do this, this, and this, you're much more inclined to do what you're told, right? That sort of thing. It's a really crude metaphor, but basically Biden's attempts, to the extent that there were ever attempts to pressure Israel, and we're going to see, in the months to come, how weak those efforts were, how strong, because right now they look pretty weak. But to whatever extent he was trying to pressure Israel, rein in Israel for a ceasefire, it wasn't bipartisan, right? Because the Republican Party was going to obstruct anything that President Biden did. They could run to dad or run to mom, right? But once Trump got involved with Biden, well, that was game over for Netanyahu, based on the reports I've heard. We'll see, though. Most successful oil trader in history. That's true. There was a really good article that was written, and Lawrence O'Donnell interviewed the author of that article. That's damn near a year ago, I think. But yeah, really good. And your DNC is a sham.
After 8 months of nonstop negotiation,
Oh, here it is.
by my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team, and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office, from this desk as president. And I've been thinking a lot about who we are, and maybe more importantly, who we should be. Long ago in New York Harbor, an iron worker installed beam after beam, day after day. He was joined by steel workers, stonemasons, engineers. They built not just a single structure, but a beacon of freedom. The very idea of America was so big, we felt the entire world needed to see. The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people, from every background and from around the world. Like America, the Statue of Liberty is not standing still. Her foot literally steps forward atop a broken chain of human bondage. She's on the march, and she literally moves. She was built to sway back and forth to withstand the fury of stormy weather, to stand the test of time because storms are always coming. She sways a few inches, but she never falls into the current below. An engineering marvel. The Statue of Liberty is also an enduring symbol of the soul of our nation. A soul shaped by forces that bring us together and by forces that pull us apart. And yet, through good times and tough times, we've withstood it all. A nation of pioneers and explorers, of dreamers and doers, of ancestors native to this land, of ancestors who came by force, a nation of immigrants who came to build a better life, a nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness, that democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example. Whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society. The presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press. Institutions that are rooted, they just might not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances. It may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years, longer than any other nation in history that's ever tried such a bold experiment. In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic. The heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe. The determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries, hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history, from new roads, bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally, giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low, meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, a single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've held my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. They just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. Now, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. But powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interest for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technology of our time, perhaps of all time. Nothing offers more profound possibilities and risks for our economy and our security, our society, for humanity. Artificial intelligence even has the potential to help us answer my call to end cancer as we know it. But unless safeguards are in place, AI could spawn new threats to our rights, our way of life, to our privacy, how we work and how we protect our nation. We must make sure AI is safe and trustworthy and good for all humankind. In the age of AI, it's more important than ever that the people must govern. And as the land of liberty, America, not China, must lead the world in the development of AI. You know, in the years ahead, it's going to be up to the president, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time and term, for the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be. And in a democracy, there's another danger to the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes a sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America, America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot. Not a guarantee, but just a fair shot. An even playing field. Going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth, remain who we are. I've always believed, and I've told other world leaders, America can be defined by one word: possibilities. Only in America do we believe anything is possible. Like a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, sitting behind this desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. That's the magic of America. It's all around us. Upstairs in the residence of the White House, I've walked by a painting of the Statue of Liberty I don't know how many times. In the painting, there's several workers climbing on the outstretched arm of the statue that holds the torch. It reminds me every day I pass it of the story and soul of our nation and the power of the American people. There's a story of a veteran. This is a veteran, the son of an immigrant, whose job was to climb that torch and polish the amber panes so rays of light could reach out as far as possible. He was known as the keeper of the flame. He once said of the Statue of Liberty, quote, "speaks a silent universal language, one of hope that anyone who seeks and speaks freedom can understand." Yes, we sway back and forth to withstand the fury of the storm, to stand the test of time. a constant struggle, a short distance between peril and possibility. But what I believe is the America of our dreams is always closer than we think. It's up to us to make our dreams come true. Let me close by stating my gratitude to so many people, to the members of my administration, as well as public service and first responders across the country and around the world. Thank you for stepping up to serve. To our service members and your families, it's been the highest honor of my life to lead you as Commander-in-Chief. And of course to Kamala and our incredible partner, the historic Vice President. She and Doug have become like family, and to me, family's everything. My deepest appreciation to our amazing First Lady who's with me in the Oval today, for our entire family. You're the love of my life and the lives of my love. My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. And may God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
Wow. Well, I was kind of surprised that it went that direction. I thought, supposedly he was going to talk more about his accomplishments, like that was supposed to be in one of or like two of his speeches. He forewent that. He mentioned at the top the ceasefire that he negotiated between Hamas and Israel, and that was it. And then the rest was basically a thank you and a warning about oligarchy. I mean, that speech could have been written by Bernie Sanders and AOC. And I'm actually pleased that he did that. I probably would have thrown a bit more about Trump in specifically, but Biden's an institutionalist to his core, to a fault perhaps, and so he's not going to shit talk the incoming president the way that the incoming president shit talked him. I have mixed feelings about that, but great speech by the president. As far as the delivery of it, mixed. I mean, Biden's never been a master orator. He can deliver a speech empathetically. Wasn't his worst by any stretch, but the content of the speech, I deeply appreciate it. So let's see. What'd you all think? Biden enacted policy that will bear fruit years after he leaves power. Trump makes sure to only take actions that benefit his image in the short term and to defer the consequences to whoever comes next. To the extent that he accomplishes anything, that's true. But yeah, President Biden's that's the frustrating thing, is that I really wish we would have elected representatives, explain some of the time horizons on this. So, like, for example, the president mentioned one of his accomplishments being the Inflation Reduction Act, which I mentioned before he started speaking. Not only did it, invest a historic sum into climate change and to addressing climate change, it also enabled Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. But the price negotiations for the first round, the first 10 drugs, don't go into effect until this year. So even though it was Biden's legislation that made it possible, Trump and the Republicans had nothing to do with it because the IRA was passed on a partisan line. It's happening like 2 years after its passage. And so I would want an elected representative, and maybe I'll ask one of them the next time I interview them. Can you explain to me why you guys stagger this shit out like 2 years in advance? Because aren't you rolling the dice? Aren't you really teeing up your potential successors who may be a Republican to take credit for it? But yeah, so it's frustrating. And maybe there's a good reason for it, but nobody's ever explained it. But yeah, Biden's policies will benefit people. It was Lawrence O'Donnell and Pete Buttigieg said that there are going to be people, there's people now who will not only be riding, and driving on roads and bridges that he built, but so too will their kids and grandkids, and et cetera and so forth. So yeah, if Harris would have brought in Bernie Bros, she would have got the extra 2%. There was just a YouGov poll today that came out that said that the single biggest reason why previous Democratic voters in 2020 didn't turn out in 2024, so Democrat to Democrat, was because of the situation in Gaza. Right? I mean, definitely lending credence to the idea that this foreign, conflict, that this foreign affairs failure, foreign policy failure, had an impact on the election. But Biden's domestic agenda is absolutely going to be ignored by the shadow of Gaza and his refusal to stand down earlier in his ill-begotten reelection attempt. Yeah, listen. So again, this isn't a foreign policy panel, a foreign policy channel, I should say. We don't cover Ukraine. We don't cover Gaza. But yeah, I think that his domestic agenda is unimpeachable. I mean, relative to his contemporaries, he's Bernie Sanders, I believe, said this on Hassan Piker stream last night that, even now Bernie will die on the hill of how great Biden's domestic agenda and accomplishments were. But yeah, foreign policy is going to be a mixed bag. I mean, I give him props for getting out of Afghanistan. Bush kicked it down the road. Obama kicked it down the road. Trump kicked it down the road. Biden bit the bullet on it. And even now you have Republicans virtue signaling over, there were 13 U.S. service people who died at Abbey Gate in Kabul. Obviously a tragedy, but more people, more soldiers died under Donald Trump, and they didn't give a damn. I think that from my relatively neophyte understanding, his coalition building as far as like the NATO alliance in combating Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, that was mostly successful. On the other hand, my understanding is there's pretty valid criticisms to make about the restrictions that he put on Ukraine's ability to basically return fire in Russia. Now, Biden's logic is you don't want to potentially trigger a hot war with Russia or any sort of like exacerbated conflict, but people are debating about whether or not that was a good idea or whether it just contributed to a situation that is, making Ukraine's footing worse. Gaza, humanitarian catastrophe, and the perception of this ceasefire, I think for a lot of people will be that, Trump put leverage that Biden simply refused to apply. Again, I'm reading reports saying that it was a joint effort, that the fact that Trump joined Biden on this left Netanyahu with no safe refuge, no safe harbor to basically give Biden the finger again. It's not like he was almost like a child who could say no to one parent because he could run and hide behind the other parent. But then when both parents stayed as a unified front, it left Netanyahu with no choice. Again, but we're just getting this information. History will judge it. But I agree, his foreign policy record is much worse than his domestic record. No question. No, this isn't live and learn. It was just reacting to President Biden's farewell address, and we're going to wrap up here. So yeah, I mean, I've been contemplating my assessment of the president for months. I stand by his domestic record, but yeah, I didn't want President Biden to run for re-election. My preference going all the way back to 2022, I was hoping after the midterms, he would announce that he was not seeking re-election in 2024 and, would encourage a primary. Once he announced he was seeking re-election, of course, I swung my sail behind him because at that point he was the incumbent president declaring his re-election bid, and the alternative was Trump. And once he had that debate performance, which was like cataclysmically bad, Trump was terrible too, by the way, and not enough attention was paid to that. But after Biden's debate performance, I didn't know whether or not he should drop out or what, because it was an unprecedented situation. I was just thinking to myself, I can't believe we're in this moment. Typically, the incumbent has an advantage. We've never been in a situation where we've withdrawn a candidate this late in the game. But obviously, in hindsight, it was right for him to drop out. He should have dropped out much sooner. He definitely should have dropped out when he did after the debate, because Kamala closed the gap. Kamala, obviously, President Biden says that He still believes he could have won. There's no data to support that. The data show that he would have lost by a considerably greater margin than Vice President Harris. Um, so yeah, I do think that these things will like blemish his legacy in a huge way. Um, Still better than Trump. So I'm kind of wrestling with it because his domestic record is better than President Obama's, President Clinton's, better than any president since at least LBJ. Um, but yeah, his decision to seek reelection despite his approval rating, yeah, that's a huge one. And again, the foreign policy mixed bag to say the least. And I don't know. Haven't had time to process the implications and the details of this ceasefire negotiations, but we'll see. Let's see. Despite all my quibbles with Biden, if he did want run for reelection, I drag through glass to vote for him. Yeah, I mean, he's not going to run for reelection now, obviously. I mean, he's not going to run in 2028. But yeah, that was my thought at the time. He is a statesman and doesn't need to say all he's done. You can see the effects in our lives by keeping us from completely falling apart as an economy. I thank Biden for his 50 years of service. Um, Hopefully, old Democrats' passive ways leave with Biden. That is something too that I hope leaves with the president when he leaves office. Is we need bold, decisive Democrats. We really do. And maybe it won't work, folks. It's entirely possible that what motivates Republicans and Republican voters simply won't motivate Democratic voters. It's possible, like, Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk, I respect it. And, instinctively, I feel the same way is that Trump, perhaps the lesson that Democrats should have learned from Trump is that it's okay to be a prick. It's okay to be a bully. You just should bully the right people, bully the bullies. And maybe that won't work. Maybe people will be turned off by it. Maybe Republicans have the secret sauce and they've cracked the code to being bullies in a way that people resonate with. But I think we should try. I think that during these next 4 years, the default posture of Democrats should not be wait and see. It should not be work with Trump when you can. The default should be opposition. And then if you choose to like switch from that default to work with Trump on like key strategic issues that you think are not only good, but that you will politically benefit from. And I'm sorry, I do think the party benefiting politically has to be part of the calculus because that's what drives the Republican Party and helps enable them to punch above their weight class. Listen, the Democrats know how to win elections. We won the 2018 midterms. We won the 2020 presidential election. We won the 2021 Senate runoff, flipping a red state. We basically won the 2022 midterms in the sense that we overperformed when you consider the headwinds. We actually gained a seat in the Senate. We won a lot of the 2023 off-year elections, overperforming. Now, 2024 was a decisive defeat. But it's not like when people say, oh, all Democrats do is lose. That's bullshit. That's not true. Electorally, we give as good as we get. But we should be winning more when you consider the popularity of our ideas. The problem is that the Republicans have so many institutional advantages. They have the media. They have now all the levers of government at the federal level. They have a majority of state legislatures. They have the Supreme Court. They have alternative media. They've got a lot. The world's richest man, the oligarchy, as President Biden points out. So they have so many institutional advantages, and they understand power in ways we don't. Maybe Democrats need to just, again, their goal should be make Donald Trump's final term in office as painful as possible for the Republicans. And then if there's a particular issue that you want to move off of to work with the Republicans on, so be it. But your default should be oppose, 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 oppose. It should be instead of what would Jesus do? What would Mitch do? What would Mitch McConnell do? The problem is that's just not typically how Democrats have behaved. So I initially supported Marianne Williamson for president, but eventually shifted support to Biden Harris when I realized she had no chance at making it into the general election. She's now running for DNC chair, so you have an opportunity to vote for her if you want to see her have a major influence over the trajectory of the DNC. Well, appreciate you guys watching this with me. Yeah, President Biden's farewell address. Again, to the extent that he was ever a masterful orator, he's certainly not one now. He never really was one to begin with. But the content of the speech, I deeply appreciate. It does feel like the end of an era. I understand why people are sad. They're probably not even sad about the president's speech so much as it is that it's just one step closer to Donald Trump taking power and Republicans having unified control. All I will say is right now, they're currently trying to figure out who the next DNC chair is. That's going to be a major step. You should be encouraging publicly Democrats to make a principled opposition, a principled, unyielding opposition to the Republican Party, and not simply cuck out for them. We've got some time to rebuild. This is our rebuilding period. So anyway, appreciate it. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already. And I'll be in DC. I'm flying to DC tomorrow to do a Tim Pool thing with Luke Beasley. There will be some videos up tomorrow, and then it'll probably be Saturday and Sunday. There probably won't be any videos Friday, most likely. So some videos tomorrow, probably not any Friday, some Saturday and Sunday. But I'll see you soon, folks. Thank you so much. We'll talk again.